Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there's really 3 sessions on the bill, I guess. Should Office be in the base image, and the definitive guide to deploying Office plus the Citrix remote access piece. So who's in the room for the AppV stuff? Who's in here? Who's AppV? Who's in here for remote access? I win. So my session, it's really, I think it's 2 parts of the same topic. You've got to make a decision around whether you're going to put Office into the base image or not. And if I haven't convinced you that you shouldn't be, that you should be putting Office in the base image, how are you actually going to virtualize it? So yeah, 45-minute session, and we'll see how we go. So people who don't know me, my name's Aaron Parker. I'm a solutions architect for Kelway here in London. I'm an AppV MVP and Citrix CTP since March. Just a really quick disclaimer. A lot of this, I think, is based on probably my experience, my opinion. I think if you talk to other MVPs, you talk to Microsoft, you're probably going to get a slightly different idea about what you should and shouldn't do. I've been working with Office since 4.2, I think, or 4.3 on Windows 3.1. So I've been deploying Office for a long time. Actually kind of get a kick out of deploying Office. So I've got a bit of experience in deploying Office. Don't ask me how to use it, but I've been deploying it for some time. And as I said, it depends who you talk to. So Microsoft probably got a fairly official stance on delivering Office with AppV, and this is my opinion. If you want a different opinion, probably ask any of the other MVPs in the room or someone from Microsoft. So I divided this up into 2 parts. Should you virtualize Office? And if you are going to virtualize Office, how to actually do it? Because the how to do it piece is the bit that everyone gets wrong. But what they don't do in the beginning is perhaps think about the whys and why nots and the implications of virtualizing Office. So at any point, just interrupt, stick your hand up. If you've got something to say, I'm all ears. So if we're looking at the desktop, a lot of what we're doing today is dividing this up into different layers, and AppV is a key to that. It's a key piece to delivering applications and allowing that desktop to be a little bit more dynamic, reducing our gold images and so on. And AppV, I think, is a great solution for this because I can package. Perhaps I should be careful saying this. I can package an application once and deliver it to multiple desktop types. So my operating system might be, I'm baking a number of dependencies into this piece, but this might be remote desktop services, it might be physical Windows 7, it might be virtual Windows 7, and hopefully I can take my applications and virtualize a certain component of those and deliver them regardless of that desktop type. But I think another key piece to this is the user piece. How do we manage? The user piece, I think, ties all of this together. The OS and the applications regardless of desktop type. That user piece is key, and I'll explain this in a little bit more detail as I go through. But in my view, AppV's a fairly solid solution. It's been around for some time under different names. But it's a pretty flexible solution. It does what it does quite well. But it was created for one of the key deliverables of AppV is trying to deliver applications and get around these legacy application issues we might have been using. Maybe we'll see what happens with AppV v5. But if I'm using this type of environment, if I'm going to license AppV, I can do it in one of 2 ways. There's probably a third way, but it's not applicable here. If I'm doing Windows 7, I need Windows 7 under software assurance, and I have to purchase MDOT. So for Windows 7, it's the only way to purchase AppV. If I'm delivering RDS, then I get AppV in the CAL. Why Microsoft does this, I don't know. Anyone who's delivering RDS, thumbs up, that's awesome. you don't have to think about it, you can just go and do it. But if I'm perhaps taking a strategic look at my desktop delivery, I want to have one way to deliver my applications across these. And if I'm only being able to license it with my RDS environment and not doing under my desktop environment, then maybe it doesn't make sense to deliver Office in one method in one location and one method in a different desktop type. When I submitted my session for BriForum, I didn't tweet about it. It was Ron Oglesby was looking at the sessions list and what was in there, and he saw the definitive guide to delivering AppV. Now, Ron Oglesby works for Unidesk. They do a layering solution, and he was saying, why is this stuff so complex? Can't we just use Unidesk? But it's the same thing. Unidesk is great for my virtual desktop environment. What about my physical desktop environment as well, my RDS environment? Unidesk is great if I'm just doing virtual desktops. What about the rest of it? And AppV is a way that I can deliver those applications regardless of that desktop. But it comes with some problems. And the biggest thing is isolation. It's a double-edged sword. It changes the user experience, but it solves issues that we had legacy applications that we can't get running under RDS or lockdown environments. AppV is a great solution for that. Perhaps not so if I'm delivering an application that integrates with the OS, and if isolation steps in and changes that user experience, I've got to handle that user expectation. So what happens in that scenario? So some of the things that it changes, the isolation changes, perhaps the default email. So mail to and default email, same sort of bag. Send to, if I'm right-clicking on a file and click send to, if I'm isolating Outlook from the operating system, my send to is not going to work. It's going to open up Outlook Express instead of Outlook. Open with and so, as well. If I right-click a document today, I'm delivering Office via AppV 4.6. If I right-click on a Word document and say open with, it's going to say Microsoft AppV. It's not going to say Microsoft Word. That user experience changes. Depending on the version of Office I'm delivering, Windows Search may not work. So if I was delivering Office 2007 via AppV, my instant search inside Outlook doesn't work because Windows Search doesn't know anything about Outlook. That's a little better in Office 2010, but I need the integration kit to do that. And it's still not quite right. Browser integration changes. SharePoint and so on. If the user expects to be able to open a browser, go straight to SharePoint, click on it and open a document. If I'm isolating Office from Internet Explorer, that user experience changes. It just doesn't work. Similarly with OneNote, I have some features inside OneNote that regardless of whether I'm delivering Office 2010 with the deployment kit, there's a couple of features inside OneNote that don't work. And the biggest challenge, another big challenge I think is Excel add-ins. Is anyone delivering Excel add-ins to Excel? So, a couple of nods. Anyone tried to deliver this once you've isolated Excel? Really scary stuff. You're going to have to write custom scripts to make sure they all enter correctly. Doesn't work so great. Double-edged sword. What we gain in one area, we lose in a few others. But I think some consideration. When we're thinking about delivering Office, making a decision about what that core image is going to look like, and whether AppV is a great solution for delivering Office or not, I think we need to, before we even think about that stuff, we need to take a step back and understand what that desktop is going to look like. And the only way I think you can get there is by doing some sort of discovery and assessment piece. You could do this manually. I think it's necessarily the best way to be doing that manually. I use tools like Citrix. You were talking about Liquidware and Lakeside and so on. So is anyone not using any of these tools? Anyone using Citrix, Lakeside, those types of things? Has anyone not seen any of these tools at all? So these are great tools that I can use to find out what is actually going on in the environment, I can find out who the users are, what applications they're using, when they launch those applications, how often they launch them. Perhaps if I'm building a virtual desktop environment, I'm also finding out those applications, CPU, memory, disk I/O, what they use, so I can design that environment correctly. And a part of that is designing what that core image is going to look like. So I need to understand integration between my applications. What is Office? What's the impact of virtualizing and isolating Office? Which other applications integrate with Office, and what work am I going to have to do to keep that user experience if I start doing Office? So identifying those common applications. The only way to do this is with some sort of discovery and assessment tool. So you need to understand the Office integration piece. Having said that though, I think Office is a mature application or suite set of applications. It's simple to deploy. It doesn't mean it's easy. It is simple to deploy and maintain. And it does coexist well with other applications. Perhaps I can't mix multiple versions of Outlook, but on the whole, Office is a well-behaved application. So where if I was looking at AppV to help me solve my legacy application issues and isolate those applications from each other, I don't necessarily need to do that with my primary version of Office. So I might have decided that perhaps I can get around isolation. I've designed my core desktop environment, my core Windows image, but I still need to consider licensing. So if you are going to virtualize Office, you must have KMS or Mac activation for Office. So if you're using Office 365, don't even think about it. The flip side of that too is anyone got, say, TechNet and retail, so consultants with TechNet and retail subscriptions? Have you tried these? Have you ever tried to virtualize Office with the media and the product keys that come out of that? It doesn't work. They're retail activation keys inside TechNet and MSDN. So although I can start using these tools in my test environment, if as a consultant, especially those guys who are working for themselves, may not have KMS keys, trying to get experience virtualizing Office isn't a simple thing. Maybe to go and borrow someone's KMS key. So major consideration, how are you licensing Office? KMS and Mac is the only way to do it. So KMS, just to be clear, KMS is the key management service where I don't actually activate the machine, it checks in and checks out an activation. And the Mac is a multiple activation key where I can deploy it and then activate it later. And when I run out of keys, I can just go and renew them, but it just doesn't work for virtualizing, especially Office 2010. So, does AppV v5 change this? I don't know yet. Mainly because Office 2010, I think, is not supported under the AppV v5 beta at the moment. You can do it. I have actually converted a 4.6 package into version 5 and it kind of runs. But I can lay down the licensing, but I don't have the integration components. They don't work. But I think AppV v5 does some interesting things. Isolation is a little looser, and we have integration points into the OS, so I get things like my right-click and a few other bits and pieces, default programs and so on. So AppV v5 may make this a little bit better, but we're still waiting on an integration kit from Microsoft. The integration kit is it's written by the Office team. It's not written by the AppV team. So the AppV team kind of has to wait for the Office team to get into gear and write this stuff. One of the goals with AppV v5 is to, well, at least in Microsoft Words, they're trying to make it the default method of deploying applications. And although, as I said, the isolation piece is looser, I think the user experience is going to be better. But at this point, we don't really have a good picture of what that's going to look like. Hopefully by release candidate, and as long as the AppV team don't spring anything on us, we might know more in, what, 6 months, you reckon? So I think the key piece today, at least, is Yes, with Office 2010 and AppV 4.6 and the deployment kit, I can deliver a reasonable experience with Office 2010 via AppV. And it's not too bad. I use it in our demo lab, but then I have very simple requirements inside our demo lab. All I need to do is just get into via XenApp and open Word and Excel and so on. Nice and easy. I'm not sitting there day to day using this stuff. I don't have complex requirements. Some deployments perhaps do have very simple requirements, and maybe it'll work there. You're not going to know unless you test it. I think I do see a lot of people rushing into this stuff and not actually thinking about the user experience, thinking about the core desktop design and what that means for my delivery mechanisms, and how AppV might impact both of those areas. So I'm going to take the politically correct road and say it depends. I wouldn't do it, but maybe. In short, I think it's don't virtualize your primary version of Office. Your primary version of Office may not be the latest version of Office. Delivering Office 2010 via AppV is probably a great solution for pilots. I'm going from Office 2003 to Office 2010. I need to pilot this stuff and get it out there. I can do some nice stuff with that, wrap it up, make it low impact on the user. I can deliver it, test it, we're fine. Now we're going into production. Let's swap those two pieces around. Let's deploy Office and now virtualize 2003 and swap them around. And we got some considerations on how we're going to do that. And so we'll talk about actually doing the virtualization bit. So this is the piece that I think requires planning, requires some experience delivering Office. If you are new to AppV or virtualizing applications, please don't start with Office. Start with something simpler. This is, I think, an advanced topic for AppV sequencing because it's a large application. It has a lot of touch points on the OS. It's not something to jump into. Plan properly. Now, I'm big on automation. I don't like doing anything manually, and I don't believe AppV is a shortcut to delivering Office. It's not actually going to make it any easier for you to deliver Office. So if you're looking to do a clean package that will just work, you need to take a step back and automate that process first. So whether I'm delivering Office as an install package or virtualizing Office, I still think that there's exactly the same amount of planning and the same amount of automation that has to go into delivering that piece. So automation, I think, is great for a few reasons. It's documented. So it's not a manual process. It's repeatable. I can go back. Someone else can go and repeat my work and understand exactly what I did to get that Office package working. I can do things in there like set default preferences. So while I love group policy, it's awesome. I don't like the fact that people go and use group policy to change defaults in Office because they haven't gone back and done the work inside their deployment package initially. So if I spend the time on Office, I sit down with the application owners and different users and work out what that default environment, Office environment should look like. I can put it into my package beforehand. And as I said, preparation makes a better package. If you prepare for this, you will be successful. So there's all sorts of bits and pieces that default user experience we want to get rid of. So maybe these types of dialog boxes. These types of dialogue. So if I'm going next, finished, I'm probably not going to get through all of these dialog boxes because I don't always get these on first run. I might get them on fourth or fifth run. And I can get rid of these by automating the package. I can get rid of these dialog boxes by spending the time on that default environment. Anyone not familiar with the Office customization tool? Okay, cool. That's pretty good. Certainly seen mixed experiences, I think, with people who perhaps don't know anything about this stuff. Great thing about Office 2007, Office 2010, this is built into setup these days. We don't have to download a resource kit. We can just go ahead and do it. So I have a I don't know, table maybe about this big, a whole heap of default settings that I want to do. And I think they're easily translatable between different environments. As an architect consultant, I see lots of different environments, and there's a certain handful that I deliver quite consistently between different environments. And this is a way to do that. It takes effort though. This takes time to work out what applies to your environment if you've got any extra that's got to go on top of this. Because there are a lot of settings inside this. And a lot is repeated in group policy, but if you spend the time here, then we can do less in group policy. If it's a preference, it only has to be set once instead of every time we log onto the machine. And certainly then if I'm sequencing Office, I don't have to go through and the sequencer, the engineer doing the sequencing piece, doesn't have to go through and use every feature and make sure everything's set up the way it should be. If I take this step, I know it's just done, easy. And it's absolutely vital for consistency. I want to deliver to the user a very consistent experience on Office, regardless of how they're getting Office, whether I'm installing or virtualizing, whether they're getting that via remote desktop services, local desktop, remote desktop, and so on. I want to deliver the user a consistent experience. So during sequencing, a couple of tips. One of these is install to the Q drive. Of course, this will go away in AppV v5. Does anyone not know Q drive is gone in AppV v5? Yay. But today, if you're doing via 4.6, install to the Q drive. I don't really know yet whether if I create my 4.6 package today and I upgrade to version 5, exactly what's going to happen. Office is a well-behaved application. It should just work. But to get around some of these issues, you've got to install to the Q drive. I don't know yet with version 5 whether you're going to have to go and recreate the package or not. We'll see. But then we can probably talk about the user profile piece. I'll talk about that in a sec. So the actual sequencing work, clean machine is vitally important. I got a blog post on this. If you go to my website, have a look up Office and the sequencing to do this. I've got a 45-step process that you can follow to create a clean sequencing machine. So clean to me is it is a machine that's not on the domain. It is a workgroup machine, so it doesn't have group policy applied to it. It doesn't have antivirus on it. I don't see any need to put antivirus inside the sequencing machine. Even if you're installing it and stopping the services, I find it highly unnecessary. That virtual environment, it should be locked down. So I have the Windows firewall turned on. I can always, it's a vDisk, I can always open up and scan it if I need to get into that. Maybe in your environment you have security experts who will force antivirus on you. I'm sorry about that one, I feel sorry for you. But from a technical perspective, I think leaving antivirus out is going to make that machine simpler. We need to understand your dependencies. So if you're doing add-ins, if you're doing other applications that hook into Office, do you need to have them installed in the sequencer before you start virtualizing Office? But also vice versa. If I'm virtualizing an application that requires Office, I need to understand those dependencies as well, and perhaps I've got to install Office into my sequencing machine before I capture those applications as well. There's a whole set of exclusions that well, at least my exclusions. I don't know if anyone else has a different set of exclusions. But say, for example, you may want to exclude the user profile. There's a couple of other areas, perhaps the Internet Explorer settings inside the registry. We don't really want those picked up inside the Office package. And there's a few other areas. Again, I think they're available on my blog if you want to go and have a look. But in your environment, this might be simpler. There is a standard set of exclusions, and perhaps in your environment, there's a few extra exclusions you want. Question?
Did you tell about the clean machine? Can Xenop be on it together with the OS?
Okay, so the question is around clean machines. Can XenApp be in that image as well? I have successfully sequenced on Windows 7 and run under RDS fine. XenApp has no real impact on the execution of an application. So my general advice is to sequence on lowest common denominator. So if I have an environment that has Windows 7 and 2008 R2 RDS, perhaps with XenApp on, hopefully with XenApp on top of it, I would sequence on Windows 7, test under XenApp. If it doesn't work, I would resequence under RDS.
And your installation account, does it have a home directory or does it only have a local profile?
A local profile only. When I sequence, that machine is a workgroup machine. It's not on the domain, so I'm actually using the local administrator account on that machine. That means I can leave UAC on, but not get prompted with the UAC dialog boxes because auto elevation just works for the local administrator.
But I guess your clean machine is not on the domain only because you are afraid of changed default domain policies, for example.
Yeah, so what I don't want to happen is if that machine is on the domain and picking up group policies, I don't want those policies to refresh right in the middle of me sequencing and end up with those policies inside the package. Now, I guess for an experienced sequencer, I'm probably going to go back through, once post-sequencing, I'm going to go back through the sequencer and have a look at those locations and maybe delete them. Or if I look at my exclusions, I'm going to exclude the policies key. But in my experience, I don't see everyone doing that. So the thing about being clean machine is I know that is a consistent environment. It's not impacted by anything on the domain. That package will just work. I go into several environments where my sequencing machine, I've deployed my SOE to here and I've turned this off and turned that off, but my package doesn't work. The other, if my SOE changes and my SOE has a DLL installed to the system, and I sequence an application that depends on that DLL won't be in the package. Now if my SOE changes and that DLL disappears, that package is now broken. Clean machine, simple as possible, I think is best.
I think there can be one disadvantage if you install Office on an RDS machine, terminal server machine. Then setup will omit certain functionality because it's on a terminal server. So if you create your package on a Windows 7 machine, perhaps components will be installed on a terminal server later, which can impact performance.
Yep. So the comments there around, if I sequence on Windows 7 and execute on RDS, that's going to be a workstation install that's executing on RDS, so the features that setup may do is different. So in that case, testing is absolutely key. If I sequence on lowest common denominator, test on RDS. If it doesn't work, I sequence there as well. Questions out the back? So question is Windows updates inside the sequencer. So yeah, when I don't think I've actually covered that in my slide deck. Good question. One of the steps I do at the end is when I go through sequencing and then I have a script that launches Windows Update. So in my automated package, I can drop in the service pack and patches and so on. And then I can then run Windows Update and make sure that thing's up to date. And for me, so far, that's been quite well. Been going quite well. I make sure I don't tick those. So don't tick the operating system updates during sequencing. That's probably not a good idea. So yes, so the question is, for my sequencing machine, do I use a fully updated machine? Yeah, my clean machine is Windows 7, latest service pack, latest Internet Explorer, updates. Okay, the integration kit, deployment kit, sorry, for Office, 2 commands, one for licensing, one for proxies. Don't try and do it on a single command. You will have some issues. And this is a common problem inside we see in the TechNet forums. So I've deployed the deployment kit and it still doesn't work. quite often it's because they're doing the licensing piece and the integration piece in 2 commands. Do everything in a single package. Dynamic suite composition is not supported for primary applications. So this means I cannot virtualize Office Standard, virtualize Project in a separate package, virtualize Visio in a separate package, and link them together with DSC. It won't work. It's not supported. If you need to do that, put them all in a single package. So a single package would have Office Standard or Professional Plus. It would have Link. It would have Project and Visio. Now, from our perspective, I guess we've got an issue where we've got to get these applications to working, but we've got a separate one. We've got the licensing piece, and they're kind of 2 separate issues. To get around I've got a package with everything in it, but I need to control who gets to what, you're going to have to control that with things like App Locker or third-party solutions like AppSense Application Manager. There's really no way around that today. AppV v5 looks like that will make that scenario better. But that was still, I think, we need to actually get a little further down there, maybe release candidate and be able to test this stuff in anger before we can be completely comfortable about that. However, I think plugins and add-ins are okay. Sorry, question?
Yeah. Why would you just create a standard Office package and a sort of Office plus project package if there's too much hassle?
I can't, well, I have a licensing problem there. So I cannot deliver Pro Plus and Standard to the same box.
No, sorry, you're saying like most of my users only need Office Standard.
Yep.
Standard or Pro, I don't care which.
Yep.
Yeah. But then I've got the guys who are project managers.
Yep.
So why don't I create an Office Pro package? Thank you very much. Test it. Move on. And an Office Pro plus project sequence. Yeah. And deliver
Yep.
that only to my project manager.
Yeah, that's absolutely valid. Yeah. What I wouldn't do is create an Office Pro Plus package and a Visio and a project package and try and deliver project to the project managers. So the question there, if you missed it, was why wouldn't I create for some users who just need Office Pro Plus, an Office Pro Plus package, and some users who need project, I get an Office Pro Plus plus project. But Office is licensed per machine. Office is not licensed per user. So I've got an issue there, is if I have a shared machine, how do I deliver just project to just the project manager when they log on, when I have to deliver that package per machine? I'll talk about that in a second. So one of the ways I think to simplify that piece, where I have multiple versions of my Office packages, is the user profile part. And maybe I'm also juggling multiple versions of Office and so on. And this is really in 2 parts. The key here, though, is making the user preferences separate to the package. So if I virtualize Office today, or if anyone's familiar with how virtual applications work, if I virtualize the application, by default, if I've gone through proper sequencing process, the user profile is also virtualized, and the user profile for that package is now tied to that package. So if I need to make changes to that package, I have to pull that package back in, make changes to it, and push it back out so that I don't affect the user experience. So if I did something like, I'm sure this never happens, push out an Office package into production, and then find out I've got a problem with it, where I have to create a brand new Office package and push that, replace it. That means that the user is going to be impacted. So I think you need to have a look at something like Flex Profiles, AppSense, Environment Manager, Res Workspace Manager, and so on. These kind of tools you need to use in conjunction with virtualizing Office so that I don't impact the user. The benefit of that too then is from a sequencing and packaging perspective, as I simplify that process too. If I don't have to worry about versioning my package and doing upgrades, then, because I'm using a third-party tool and I know they're always going to get the standard user preferences regardless of how I'm delivering those applications, then my sequencing and packaging team can simplify their approach to virtualizing and delivering Office, make it not a lot easier. One of the things I think that the prescriptive guidance for delivering Office misses out, and it's quite a good document. I can't quite understand why people have a hard time following it, but it's a good document. One of the things it does miss out, though, is the user profile piece. So here's a view. You probably won't be able to see this up the back, I know. Here's a view of what's captured inside the AppV package. If I go and follow the prescriptive guidance for sequencing Office 2010, I'm going to get a number of folders inside app data, and there's maybe 15 folders inside there. If I then go and execute that package on a desktop and maybe come back 3 weeks, 2 months later, I'm going to get a number of extra folders on top of this. So this is a view of what's actually on the real file system. This is what has been not captured inside the package. So now I have user preferences inside the package and user preferences outside the package. So I have this sitting in two places. And if I'm not using a third party, if I'm just using roaming profiles, that's a pretty poor user experience. Going back to versioning and so on, this is where I'm going, if I change that version, this is how I'm going to start impacting the user experience. So you've got a couple of choices here. Third-party management, user profile management solution, or perhaps even regardless of that, during sequencing, there's a whole heap of extra folders that we need to create at sequencing time, inside app data, and capture those inside the package. $64-bit Office. Anyone delivering 64-bit Office? Yeah, you put your hand down. A couple of people. If you were to read the prescriptive guidance for Office to the letter, it appears that Office, 64-bit Office is not supported under AppV by Microsoft. I can't remember the exact quote, but it's in the prescriptive guidance. Regardless of that, the deployment kit doesn't offer proxies for 64-bit Office. So where I'm delivering for Office 2010 the deployment kit for Office, and I get the nice integration piece, I get the mail applet in control panel, I get my SharePoint integration and so on, that is not supported for 64-bit Office. So if I'm delivering 64-bit Office as my primary version of Office, probably don't want to be thinking about virtualizing Office. However, I think where it does make sense is in scenarios where I'm delivering 32-bit Office, but for some users they need 64-bit Excel or Access for some high processing of some type of data, financial data, I presume. But that's a very simple scenario. So in that scenario, I would sequence Excel by itself. I would turn off file type associations. Perhaps I want to make sure it's completely isolated from the install Office. Turn off local interaction allowed, and so on. And it does seem to work quite well. So while it appears that it's not supported, some specific scenarios, it works pretty well. So what about previous versions? And this is really, I didn't find a better way to say this, but this is really, what about the version that is not my primary version? So if I'm juggling different versions of Office. So I was saying earlier, I'm delivering Office 2010 as a pilot to users who are already on Office 2003, and then flipping that around. Or I am delivering earlier versions of Office because I have some older applications that require a specific version of Office. How do I deliver that, again, consistently and ensure it doesn't impact my primary version of Office? Same deal, single image, single package. Stick it all in a single package, don't rely on DSC. We probably want to do things like remove file type associations, hide the user profile so it doesn't impact, and so on. Again, automation. Automate the install of that, so if it comes time that you need to recreate that image or that Office package, someone else can recreate it, it's documented, it's consistent, reliable, done. So what about Office 15? I don't know. So today, if I deploy the Office 2010 and the deployment kit, I have my licensing components that sit outside alongside the AppV client. I don't know yet what's going to happen with Office 15. 2007 and 2003 are nice and easy. They don't have volume activation version 2. You can just put a VA1 key inside the package and it's just done, doesn't require any extra activation. So 2007, 2003 work quite well. I don't know yet what's going to happen with juggling 2010 and Office 15. That's going to be an interesting challenge. We'll see how we go later in the year. So, deployment time, the fun bit. Office needs to be a global package. So if I want integration with proxies to work, I really can't deliver, and I'm talking about Office 2010 here, I can't deliver Office 2010 to the user. I need to deliver that as a global package. And there's a few ways I can do that, but if I'm using the AppV management server, I'm kind of stuck. Perhaps for that reason the AppV management server isn't the right tool. And there's licensing considerations in that as well. Microsoft licenses Office per device. It is not per user. So technically speaking, if you're delivering any type of Office application other than, say, the Access Redistributable, you are not adhering to the letter of the license agreement if you're delivering that per user. Office needs to be a per device global package. Obviously that doesn't always work. We have requirements. We need to deliver some of this stuff per user. But if I'm thinking about virtualizing my primary version of Office, I should be thinking about delivering that as a global package. If I'm doing virtual environments, what I don't want to happen is delivering a package as large as Office to the user and having that streaming at execution time. Because you've got to think about, as Dan was pointing out yesterday, what about the write I/O in that scenario? I think the smallest you'll be able to get Office 2010 Professional Plus to is about 690 meg. So if I go and exclude the installer, Windows installer folder, exclude the MSO cache folder and compress that package, it's still a large application. If I'm streaming that at launch time, what's going to happen to the write I/O in that scenario? And that's virtual desktops, that's RDS as well. Pre-cache that image. And then how are you going to fit this into your larger application delivery strategy? The AppV management server is probably not the best solution for this. You probably need to look at SCCM, maybe MDT, or some sort of third-party application delivery solution. How do you juggle plugins? This is always fun. At execution time, if you're using DSC to put in several Excel plugins, you're going to have to wrap a script inside there so that they all actually load. There's some juggling inside the user registry that you're going to have to do at execution time because it won't work unless you have a script sorting that out for you. And then updates. How are you going to handle updates? As I was saying, the user profile, a third-party user profile management solution will allow you to make that package independent of the user side. So I can deliver a consistent user experience, and the back end, I'm delivering either Office via an installed or virtualized, or multiple virtualized packages. So when I'm updating that package, I want to bring it back in to my sequencer, open it up, run Windows Update, sequence it, zip it back up, push it back out again, and hope that that doesn't break my package at some point and then impact the user. So just to wrap up, I think. So real quick summary. Plan for this stuff. Plan for this stuff. Plan, plan, plan. AppV is not a shortcut. I think there's exactly the same amount of... I'm installing Office by the way I have been doing in the past 15 years. I have exactly the same amount of work that I need to do to plan Office as I do if I'm virtualizing it. Doesn't matter whether I'm installing or virtualizing. Automating and planning that Office delivery will make sure that that's a successful Office package. But we have to think about, if we're going to virtualize Office, I think the primary question is, does it change the user experience? If it does, then perhaps virtualizing the primary version of Office is not the ideal scenario. Single package. Stick it all in a single package. That might mean multiple single packages, but we need to think then about licensing and delivery mechanisms, but control execution of those applications inside that single package with tools like AppLocker. AppLocker is free. It's in the operating system if you have Windows 7 and above. Or third-party solutions like AppSense Application Manager and so on. Profile management is absolutely essential. I don't think you can get away with delivering, well, I don't think you can get away with virtualizing any application without a third-party profile management solution. Microsoft UEV may change this. Microsoft UEV can get inside the bubble and abstract the user preferences from the AppV package. So, but it's a component of MDOP. It's still in beta, so it's not available yet. And I have no idea how it's going to be available for RDS solutions. But user profile management allows me to deliver a consistent user experience regardless of how I'm delivering that application. So thank you. My details are in there if you want to have a look. I have a lot of Office stuff and AppV stuff on my blog site. There's a lot of what I've been talking about I already have up on the website. So yeah, maybe, do we have time for questions? So yeah. Yeah, okay. So Dan's going to come up. Maybe some questions if we need it while we're swapping over.
You mentioned Link 2010 very, very briefly there.
Yep.
Any experiences with AppV and that? Because we're using Office 365 dedicated. We're in this evergreen concept of moving OCS to Link to whichever version, etc.
Yep.
And we had the comment from Microsoft saying that it's basically completely not supported to use AppV.
So yeah, there is a. So the question there is around Link, Office 365. What about AppV? There is a white paper from Microsoft. I can't remember even where it is anymore. I've been looking for it myself, but it says the version of Office that comes with Office 365 is not supported under AppV. The reason for that is the version of Office that comes with Office 365 is a retail version of Office. It's not Mac or KMS. You need Mac or KMS to virtualize this stuff. And I think there's also some license pieces around that as well. And what I would think applies to Office would apply to Link as well.
More of the concerns were more related to the kind of audio and video side. Using audio and video calling from Link. That was more of the concern that we were.
So why would AppV? So AppV doesn't change where the application executes.
That's why I'm interested to hear your comments, because this was a thing that came from Microsoft Consulting. They really didn't.
Office works great, but it changes the user experience. Well, if I virtualize Link, I have no integration into Internet Explorer. Is that all the questions?
Anyway, good presentation.
All right. Well, for the second half, or I guess for the next 25 minutes, we're going to talk a little bit about what I think is probably one of the more confusing things if you're using a Citrix solution and trying to provide remote access to it. For the first 11 slides, it's going to be confusing. And then at the very last slide, I'm just going to give you my opinion as to what I think you should be doing. There are some changes coming, and so my advice is based on some of those changes that I think you'll be seeing in the near future. So how many of you are here that have a Citrix environment that are using CSG, CAG, AGE, NetScaler? Put your hands up. Oh, wow, a lot of people. Okay, awesome. So let's get started. A little bit about me. I'm a pre-sales solutions architect, much like Aaron. I am based out of Denver, Colorado. I focus really on just desktop virtualization solutions. I am a VMware vExpert as well. My blog is up here. I'll be posting these slides. I got to post my slides from yesterday too, but I had too many drinks and then was way too tired to do it last night when I got back to my room. So, and I am fairly active on Twitter, and so if, like I said in my session yesterday, I think Twitter is a fantastic business tool. I would like to see more of the people that I work with, using it as well. I don't post, what I eat for lunch and things like that on there. So if you want to follow somebody who tweets mainly, business-related things and a few F-bombs here and there, then you can follow me. So what we're going to cover today, a little bit about the architecture. So what the Citrix Remote Access solutions we're going to talk about are really where they sit in the environment. We're going to talk briefly about Citrix Secure Gateway. I've posted a blog post a few months ago, mainly because I got tired of trying to talk people out of using CSG in their environment, just because it's free, and happy to see some changes that will push people along. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about Citrix Access Gateway, Access Gateway Enterprise Edition, talk about NetScaler, which is a superset really of the Access Gateway Enterprise Edition, and where I think that is a valuable play for people and where that helps. And then lastly, like I said, at the very end, I'll just give you my advice as to the two platforms, if I were you, that I would pay attention to. So Citrix Remote Access, really what we're talking about here is, for those of you in the back, and that is a little blurrier on the screen than it is on my laptop, but here in the middle we've got the web interface, and this is being moved over now to Receiver Storefront. So this is one of the things that is really changing the solution that we're putting here in the middle, the remote access component, because it needs to start to work with storefront services. And then down here on the bottom, I've got Zen App 6.5 controller, some workers, Zen Desktop controller, and you've got an XML broker, and you've got a STA on both of those. Or if you've got one of those deployed, you might not have the other half of it. But essentially, what we're trying to do here is, for people that are coming in through the internet, we would prefer to have a single port open to the outside, HTTPS, connect to any Zen App Worker node or any virtual desktop that sits behind it. And fundamentally, the thing that we're trying to do is only expose that single port and then have that device here in the middle proxy a connection either on port 1494, 2598 to ICA or CGP to the endpoints that are inside your environment. So in many cases, this layer right here, this might be your DMZ network. In most cases, with customers that I work with, it is the DMZ network, but that's not a hard and fast rule. And in some cases, there are systems that are in the DMZ as well as on the inside, and we're proxying between the two. Really comes down to some of the security rules that you have in your own environment. And in some cases, it's actually on the inside of the network, believe it or not. So when we're talking about remote access for Citrix, we're talking about really two main things. ICA proxy, this is really that HTTPS from the outside into the environment, and then 1494, 2598. But this is the term that people use. It is included in really any of the access gateway solutions. It's really, like I said, the most common requirement. This is what people want when they're coming in from their iPad, from home, outside of their work, from a kiosk machine, things like that. Then there's also some capabilities in that middle solution set around SSL VPN. I see less and less people using SSL VPN. How many of you guys use SSL VPN on a daily basis today? So still a fair number of people. I do see this, really as a smaller requirement than I did 3 years ago, but that's another component that some of these solutions offer, others don't. It's included in your platinum licenses for Zen App or Zen Desktop, or you can buy it one at a time with a universal license. And then another big thing that I don't see being talked about a lot, but for organizations where security is a big deal and where we are starting to bring in more devices such as home users, home PCs, things like that, endpoint analysis. So the ability for us to do scanning of the endpoint and then change our policy or even prohibit users from accessing the environment. Really common use case would be if you fail, basically it would like hide a reg key in company machines. If the presence of that reg key is not detected, we would maybe hide the ability to see local drives from the endpoint they're connecting from. So that's a very common use case. And again, that's included in Platinum or Universal licenses. And there are some differences between these different solutions as to how they implement endpoint analysis. So Citrix Secure Gateway. And this is the most time I've ever dedicated to it in the last, well, since I wrote that blog post. But I'm not a fan of Citrix Secure Gateway. It is, in all quotes, free. Go ahead.
Am I all right to ask a question now or towards the end of the presentation? Or?
Yeah, if it goes too long or if I think I'm going to cover it later, I'll stop you. But
okay, just on the EPA side of things.
Yes.
Before, is that still compatible with x64 going forwards?
As far as I know.
Because, okay, I've heard a couple of things where it's sort of blocked out or something like that, but it's all right.
No, as far as I know. There are some differences. I'll hit on that as far as how the different platforms implement it. And, you'll see. So Citrix Secure Gateway is a Windows-based service. It runs on, typically I see it installed on web interface servers. It proxies all of your traffic to the web interface site. It doesn't perform authentication. There is no built-in HA or load balancing. It does not provide SSL VPN. If you are connecting from Citrix receiver on any endpoints, so where you are actually installing the receiver for Mac or for your Windows desktops or for iPad or Android, you have to provide the long path to the PN agent site. So on web interface today, we have websites and we have PN agent sites or the services site. Those services sites are what basically have that long path with a config.xml at the very end of it. And if you are using Secure Gateway, you have to provide that path to your end users. So I find that sometimes that can be a challenge. Also some challenges around certificate chaining. If you are buying certificates from less well-known root certificate authorities. It doesn't provide any authentication, so you would be doing all authentication at the web interface layer. It is important to note that Storefront, going forward, really just provides, right now, authentication for Active Directory, so they're pushing a lot of that two-factor authentication out to that remote access layer. And then the big one here where I think this is what's eventually going to move people off of Citrix Secure Gateway is that Citrix is no longer building support going forward for Secure Gateway in working in a storefront environment. So effectively, it might now finally, at last, forever be dead. So I know that for years, Citrix has said, hey, we're not going to be doing future development on this, and then they release a few more hot fixes, and it goes on a little bit longer. I'll tell you, as an organization who does consulting on Citrix quite a lot, I have actually refused to implement Secure Gateway for our customers. Typically, when I'm involved and I'm doing a project, this is, I'm not coming in for, a couple $100 to deploy some software into an environment. We're not there deploying, a $200 solution. And so I feel so strongly about this that if you're going to go and spend tens of thousands of dollars on a Citrix solution, then you should spend some money making sure that you're doing remote access properly. And so I've actually told people if they want Citrix Secure Gateway in their environment, they can do it themselves after we leave. So, and then usually they listen up a little bit more and we're talking about like, okay, so, why do you feel so violently about Citrix Secure Gateway in our environment? And we go on. Citrix Access Gateway Standard. So this is version 5.4 today. It's available as both physical and virtual appliances, and this is something that's a common theme even in the Access Gateway Enterprise Edition and NetScaler. It's rated. I don't have customers that are using. I don't know anybody that I've talked to that has 500 users on either one of these appliances. Typically, there are other things that are driving them to some of the other like NetScaler platforms, but it's rated for 500 users for SSL VPN. So I still see a lot of customers that have Model 2000. It's basically a hardware appliance. It is end of life. It's been end of life for about 18 months now. And so if that rings a bell, you should probably figure out how to move that out of your environment. The Model 2010 is still being sold. There's also a Model MPX 5500, which is a more powerful physical platform. but just be aware that is not using the Access Gateway standard. That's actually using a different version of Access Gateway. And there's a VPX appliance model as well. So for those of you who are, I guess, feeling less inclined to use physical appliances. And we'll talk a little bit about the differences between physical and virtual later. Access Gateway Standard Edition does provide both the option for ICA proxy, so just HTTPS across the internet connecting to your internal infrastructure, as well as SSL VPN. And then the one thing I think that's really was a positive here for Access Gateway is they worked with a company called OpSWAT, and I've got a screenshot here on the next slide. OpSWAT is essentially, you can go out to their website today, citrix.opswat.com, and you can actually build your policies. So they have basically the policy engine. You download and put it into your Access Gateway appliance, and then you would build that policy really, kind of wizard-based online, very easy to do, and then export the policy to import into your environment. Again, you're going to be using what I would say the long path to PN agent. It also supports HA and clustering, so a step up from Secure Gateway. This would be built into the appliance. Typically, again, these would be deployed into DMZs rather than internal networks. It does support multi-stream ICA. This isn't a feature I know anybody in the Denver area using, but multi-stream ICA is the ability to take that single, what is today a single port, and be able to break that into multiple ports, multiple TCP ports. Typically, you'd be doing this on an internal environment to apply QoS policy to it, but there are some use cases for doing this also remotely. Of course, you're not going to control the internet. Maybe it's an MPLS network, and you're still coming in through this remote access solution, but it does support multi-stream ICA. And one thing I think, so I bolded the things that I really thought were differentiators here. It does not have any built-in like load balancing support for web interface, storefront, or XML brokers. So for people that are deploying redundant farm configurations, and for most people that are doing any sizable deployment, that's really a requirement going in. That's something that's usually getting picked up in our requirements, and we have to build some load balancing. Hopefully not Microsoft load balancing. It's not as intelligent as I would like it to be, so Microsoft NLB. But we want to do some load balancing of both the XML broker, the web interface, or now it is going to be storefront, and we need to be aware when the STA is up and down, things like that. So this is a screenshot, and it looks like everything I have on here is a little bit blurry, but this is basically on the left here. You've got malware scanner, antivirus, anti-spyware, firewall, peer-to-peer, patch management, anti-phishing, hard disk encryption, global settings. So there's a lot of things that the OpSWAT tool allows you to basically build policies on, and it makes it pretty easy for even a novice who doesn't really know how to build policies in the Access Gateway Enterprise Edition to build them for the Access Gateway Standard Edition. So typically when we are doing deployments of, or larger deployments of Citrix Zen Desktop or Zen App, this is what we're implementing. And a few of I think the critical things are highlighted here. So actually, the big one really is the fact that we can use the HTTP header policies that exist within that platform to be able to intelligently direct clients to the PN agent site versus to a website. So especially as we're moving forward here from using web interface, we've got legacy clients that are connecting in through the PN agent site, and now we have storefront. Basically, Citrix has changed the HTTP headers that those clients use, and we can detect those headers and basically change the farm or the path that they are connecting to based on that. So the larger the environment is, the more important I think it is to give a user a single URL to be able to access that environment, whether they're inside, outside, using receiver on their Android device or from a home device. But the Access Gateway Enterprise Edition comes as both a virtual appliance and a physical appliance. The VPX is rated for 300 SSL concurrent connections. And then the big thing I think that drives some of the VPX versus MPX or physical versus virtual conversations is the SSL transactions per second. So a couple of years ago, we were all using 1024-bit keys. The standard now, I don't know if you can even still get, I don't know, any of you guys ever actually able to obtain 1024-bit keys anymore? I haven't been able to find any for a while. So 2048-bit keys. The important thing here is to realize that the VPX, the SSL transactions per second, using a 1K key is 500. Using a 2K key, it's 100. And so that's not concurrent connections, that's basically transactions per second. It's something you can monitor by going onto the appliance. And depending on what's going on in your environment, I did some testing in our own. Sometimes about 6 SSL transactions. It wasn't a scientific test, but just understand that that doesn't translate to concurrent users. So a lot of this is going to depend on how spiky your environment is for people that are logging in via the access gateway. What else in here? It does support multi-stream ICA, supports HA and clustering, and then I don't know how many of you saw this announcement at Synergy last week. This was actually made public in some of the Citrix TV videos that are out there, but Citrix is releasing an HTML5 receiver. It's not meant for for everybody to be using all the time. It really is out there to replace the Java client and to be occasional kiosk access, but only the Access Gateway 10 today supports that receiver, the HTML5 version of the Citrix receiver. But Access Gateway Enterprise Edition, if you're just buying that license, does still not have any built-in support for doing load balancing of web interface, storefront, or the XML broker. And so, of course, right, we're a consulting company, and this is the most expensive solution, and so this is the best solution. But realistically, this, typically when we are doing larger deployments, really our minimum going into that is, we're using NetScaler standards, which includes Access Gateway Enterprise Edition, as does the Enterprise and Platinum Edition of NetScaler. But we're using the NetScaler standards to really there to load balance, to do things like I took out here, doing health monitors. So within the NetScaler platform, we can actually build health monitors for the different components that we're load balancing. So it's not just a, is the port open, is the port closed, but we can actually test the XML broker to make sure that we're getting a valid response back from it. And then we're testing the web interface site, we're testing storefront. It's aware of the STA availability as well. The way that these NetScalers are licensed is a little bit different than the other platforms. Again, we have a physical and a virtual appliance option. On the virtual appliance, in addition to buying it as a standard enterprise or platinum edition virtual appliance, you are also licensing for the throughput. And so today basically those tiers are 10, 200, 1,000, and 3,000. And so for most mid-sized organizations, say a few hundred users that are going to be using this, they're going to be probably larger than the 10, smaller than the gig, using maybe like a 200 megabit throughput virtual appliance. You have a question there?
Yeah. How do you solve the load balancing of the SDA? In my opinion, you got trouble when the SDA ID changes, or is it?
No. So within when you're setting this up, you just are adding multiple redundant STAs, and so it's going out and it's making sure that the health of the STA that is healthy. You're not really load balancing a single or multiple STAs, because there's a unique identifier for the STA, and if you try to see, yes, you know where I'm going with that. The other component here that is also in the NetScaler platform that isn't in just like an Access Gateway Enterprise Edition platform that is sometimes important to people are features like global server load balancing. So if you have multiple sites and you have multiple farms and you are trying to bring people from maybe the UK into a UK data center and people from the US into a US data center, NetScaler would also be that platform that we're commonly using. That's actually available in the Enterprise Edition or as an uplift to the Standard Edition. And whether you're using virtual appliances or physical appliances, that's still, I'm going to cover that here in another slide. And then also, I've done a few of these implementations. They do support web interface on NetScaler. So be aware, though, that web interface, web interface on the Windows platform, that is no longer being developed. I'm not sure as to what the overall future for web interface on NetScaler is. Maybe in the short term, it is a way to keep web interface around for legacy applications, but web interface on NetScaler is J#, which is not what is written on Windows. So it's its own little web interface, right? It's completely different with many of the same features, but just know that it's completely different code from web interface on Windows.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a reason why you'd want, other than for legacy things, to
Are there reasons why?
Yeah.
I mean, so if you look at some of the things that Storefront does, it doesn't have feature parity with everything that Web Interface does today. I don't know if anybody from Citrix here wants to talk about what that future might be afterwards, but there are some things, you know, how we might filter some applications that, you know, the fact that, I mean, Web Interface is kind of raw. There are people out in the community that have, you know, figured out how to do a lot of crazy things with JavaScript, just putting it onto the Web Interface site and filtering things out, changing the user experience. So there might be some reasons why you would want to keep Web Interface around. I don't know if you're going to put it on NetScaler necessarily, but there are definitely reasons why people keep Web Interface or will need to keep Web Interface around, at least with some of my customers. There is a KB article out there for doing an install of Storefront and Web Interface on the same machine. So that's an option as well. So physical versus virtual, and this is where I spend a lot of time. We figure out, like, okay, so secure gateway's dead. I see that you like Access Gateway Enterprise Edition. I do want to do some load balancing in HA, so I'm probably thinking about a NetScaler standard, but now I need to decide between physical and virtual appliance. So number one, the larger the environment is, the more likely it is that you're going to need to look at a physical appliance. The main reason for that is to support the number of SSL transactions per second that you're going to want to push into that environment. And also keep in mind that that's, transactions per second. So, in an education environment where you have a lot of things happening in a very short period of time, you might not have as many users, but you have a lot of things happening in a very condensed window. The other big one is the network placement of this device, the remote access component. Like I said, most times people are putting this into a DMZ network, and the way that you are segmenting that network from the rest of your environment a lot of times dictates whether we're looking at physical and virtual appliance. So if you have a virtual infrastructure that already exists in your DMZ, that's maybe a plus then for looking at virtual appliances. If you're doing basically electrical isolation, bring it into separate network interface cards on your hypervisor on the inside, that's another way that maybe that you're deploying virtual machines or virtual appliances out to the DMZ. But in some cases, what I find is that customers are more comfortable with physical appliances. Maybe their requirements also demand physical appliances. Maybe they don't have virtual infrastructure in their DMZ network. Maybe that's just what they do, right? They buy physical appliances. So those are the things really that I think what I found that drive that decision between virtual and physical. From a feature function perspective, other than that SSL transactions per second, it's the same code. And in fact, we see a lot of people that are taking code out of their dev environment, exporting it, putting it into production, or knowing that at least if they're going to deploy virtuals first, that they can export that code and go to physical appliances later down the road. Certificate size, like I said, it definitely drives that SSL transaction per second number. So if you are an environment that for some reason would need to go beyond 2048, you're probably already automatically going to be doing physical appliances. And then the throughput number. So if you're doing a virtual appliance, keep in mind that you are going to be purchasing that virtual appliance in the NetScaler lineup based on how much throughput you're going to push through it. And then the other use cases. So NetScaler, the good and bad of it is it does a lot of things. What we do with a deployment where we're providing remote access is just one of the many things that a NetScaler appliance can do. I'm not somebody who focuses much on security and application firewall and content rewrite and things like that, but there's a whole feature set on top of the NetScaler platform that's out there. So that's the other part of this that I find sometimes drives the decision between physical and virtual. If you are an environment that is using maybe Cisco load balancers, F5 load balancers, doing other things with that environment, that's another thing that I find drives that decision between physical and virtual. I found that typically once we go outside of just looking at remote access to a Citrix solution, we're typically then usually talking about physical appliances to do some of what they want to do in the environment. Another common thing that I see done that also drives up that SSL transactions per second number is people will be using this to front end their Exchange environment, their SharePoint environment, things like that. There's some great deployment guides out on Citrix's website, walk you through setting that up. So kind of boiling it down here, we've got my 1 minute over. Making it easy for you. Secure gateway is dead. Move on. Access gateway. I'm not encouraging my customers to look at Access Gateway. That's all I'll say about that for now. Access Gateway Enterprise Edition is really, I think, the feature set that people are looking for. And this is where, definitely I think more of the development work is being done. And then since Access Gateway Enterprise Edition is included with NetScaler Standard, if you are trying to deploy load balancing, if you're trying to deploy a highly available Citrix environment, this is not adding that much to the cost. This is why I have that argument about, please do not do secure gateway in your environment. This is really a critical component in my world of making sure that the environment is available, that we're doing intelligent health checks, that we're not, black holing requests down to a web interface server. And then, physical or virtual, I think I've gone through that, but I find that virtual works in many, many use cases. You just need to kind of go through that checklist of, what do you have in your DMZ? How many SSL transactions per second? Do you want to expand this in your environment? Do you want that platform scalability within a physical appliance versus a virtual? And I don't know if I mentioned it, but really the big thing that's the difference in the physical and virtual is the physical appliances have SSL offload. So they actually offload that in hardware versus a virtual appliance that's trying to do that with CPU. So that's part of the reason for the scalability. So thank you for coming. It's a lot of talk in a very short period of time. Go ahead.
Do you implement the NetScaler most of the time in 2-arm deployments or with 1-arm deployments?
Actually with one, usually.
Yes?
Yeah.
But I think you will have many discussions with the firewall managers then.
Well, so when traffic comes into a NetScaler, right, we're coming into the virtual IP address, and then all traffic that comes out of that is originated from typically the SNP, right? So from a firewall administrator perspective, they're looking at it, as this SNP needs to access internal resources. In environments where that's not, so the other option is we can do, 2-arm. We can basically split the DMZ. So traffic comes into the DMZ has one arm there and one arm on the inside, or one arm there, one arm into another DMZ. We can actually also do NetScalers into a DMZ, tunnel them to another inside pair of NetScalers, and then originate the traffic. So, there's lots of levels, I guess, you can go through, but typically what I find is that, it depends on the organization. What's their security posture in general? We worked at organizations that basically logically firewall every single component of the entire Citrix solution. They do cool photos from space, and they still are doing a 1-arm deployment of a NetScaler. So.
But the firewall can become a bottleneck if you have a 1-arm deployment.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, doing load balancing, yes. Yeah, so typically if we're going to do a lot of load balancing and that NetScaler is sitting in the DMZ, then sometimes we're also considering a pair of virtual appliances on the inside of the network so that we don't have to route traffic through the firewall, because they're not planning on us load balancing internal traffic passing through a firewall. Yes. Anybody else? I'll be hanging out, I guess, right outside the room here. You guys need the room for another session.